Kristin is a World War I aficionado and expert, and I'm glad I brought this along because this is an authentic World War I primary source artifact. Welcome to the Everything's a Primary Source podcast, and what are we looking at here?
So it's 3 parts. The first letter is for a detachment, the 26th Division from the American Expeditionary Force, dated France, April 5th, 1918. So a little less than about a year, give or take, from the arrival. Yeah, the arrival of first folks into France. And I feel like this is just something students, again, amateur historians like myself, would really dig into, which I did.
Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we construct history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture.
So Henry H. Wheelock, he signed these orders. So the first letter here is, it's a memo to a senior officer in charge. And essentially it talks about the movement of stuff. Howard Green is an engineering officer and they're moving supplies. And I think what's really interesting about this particular artifact is it's like 10 cans of coffee, 12 Marmite cans, which if anyone knows what Marmite is, that's,
Do we want to know what it is?
It's like if I'm not 110% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's like Australian Nutella. Apologies to Australian fans.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that salty, like
very turn of the century delight.
But also probably just packed with calories because what are we doing, right? 1 large coffee can, so 10. I'm assuming that's 10 small coffee cans. 1 rolling kitchen, and they're trailing the American Expeditionary Force. So it's not about troop movements, it's about the movement of things that a troop needs to survive in battle.
So as much as possible, the comforts of home, or at least the foods from home, transported to France to try to, because soldiers can't fight on empty bellies. It's like a very important thing. One thing that I like about this, and you mentioned a typo, it is typed. There is some handwriting on it, but it's a typed document, which tells us that a typewriter was involved, is some version of automation, which the previous conflict before this that the United States embarked on was the Spanish-American War. And I think you can tell from World War I documentation that there was a lot of course correction it's amazing that the Spanish-American War was successful considering how ill prepared and deployed it was. I don't think they would have had anything as organized as this back then when they were boarding those ships in Tampa to head over to Cuba.
Right.
So here we have, it could be just like lesson learned. Let's be a bit more diligent. Don't forget anything except for how to spell names, and then, and type this all out. And calling it the American Expeditionary Force, I think, is an essential component of this. That really framed for everybody involved what the United States was doing in World War I, right? It wasn't...
Definitely.
We weren't joining the war. We were there to end it.
End it, right? Yeah. We're bringing fresh legs, which is, I think, also... So it says orders for 5 American trucks that are coming to, and they also spell it differently in the meat of the letter here, but it says are coming to Liffo-le-Grand, which is actually, for those, again, listening at home, it's Liffol. Le Grand. And that is the place where the American Expeditionary Forces would actually go prior to deployment into places like the Argonne or at Chateau Thierry. This is where they learned to train in trench warfare. So they came from Kansas, they came from parts of the United States, shipped Long Island, and they shipped over and then had to train how to fight in the French forests. And they literally trained in the French forests, but they needed food. They needed enough, what does it say here? Keep gas enough to get back to the front. So like also thinking about lessons learned, make sure you have enough gas in your car to get home. Do not ride home on empty. This is, to your point about the Spanish-American War, the lead up to American intervention in World War I is slow. It's a slow burn. There's a lot of time between the Lusitania and the Zimmermann telegram. We teach that in a way where it seems very truncated, but there's years in between that. And New York State in particular had two factions that wanted to enter the conflict. They were the head of what was called the preparedness movement. Mm-hmm. So preparedness was like a sort of like enhanced version of the Boy Scouts, where they would send young men to these preparedness camps in upstate New York.
Plattsburgh.
Yeah.
Barracks there.
To train, to like practice in the event that the movement in Congress moved towards.
And that was a Rooseveltian idea, right?
Theodore Roosevelt.
And we just mentioned the Spanish-American War. That's him looking at that as, all right, let's test run this. And we need officers. We need people that, because this is what we have here is such a great, just like dipstick into America and our understanding of military life in that time period, because having a large standing army just wasn't understood to be American. Mm-hmm. That wasn't what we did. And yet we're in the modern era, as evidenced through all the stuff that you need, including gasoline. Right. That wasn't a factor back in 1898. Right, they didn't have cars. Yeah, and the horses drowned as they tried to bring them ashore in Cuba.
Oh, that's awful.
Some did, and I like the story of when Roosevelt and his Rough Riders arrive in Cuba. He had personally recruited a lot of his friends from the West. He had a lot of Native Americans and cowboys who he said, and then also his Ivy League friends who also could ride horses and shoot guns. And it was so hot. They had those wool uniforms on, totally unprepared for the heat in Cuba. And they ended up just stripping down all their clothes as they took everything off the ships and brought it ashore. So the Cuban revolutionaries who are watching their new allies show up are like, oh God. We have a bunch of naked cowboys arriving here. Whereas like this doesn't seem to mention anything like that at all. It's very organized. It seems like they are organized. And to bring them to, because we just kind of had this wrong assumption about the First World War that trench warfare not only began right from the beginning, which it didn't, it developed or devolved into that, but that Americans would know how to do it. And so, and that there is a behind the lines in World War I, like there's plenty of stuff. Like if we learn nothing else from Snoopy, we know that there's villages that were facing very similar experiences that would happen that are usually connected to World War II. Occupied troops, having all of their stuff. Like, isn't this letter mention something about like going into the town to acquire things?
Yes. So they're part of the April 5th letter is in order to facilitate the work, you are hereby directed as soon as you complete the salvaging of clothing to arrange various barrack buildings and storehouses or billets, bunks, cots, mess tables, benches. And then in March of 1918. So prior to the arrival of all of the new stuff that was coming in April, there were orders for, I don't know, probably about 20 guys here, 20 young privates, their job is strictly to protect the product. The service records will be endorsed and turned over to Major Mayo. The following enlisted men will report to Major Mayo to act as guard for the property left at this village. Some of the other quick research, which I think is key to the name of the podcast, Everything is Primary Source. Because this was a town, the farmland, the community is in the Western Front and the Eastern Front, those lines are always shifting by 50 meters, by 100 meters in some bits. Most of the folks are billeted inside the homes of French people. They're sharing space with farmers, with French folks who have already been enduring 4 years of conflict at this point.
Isn't that, again, it's smashing all these because World War I unfortunately gets just such a glossed over treatment that it's like a couple old footage of guys going over the top and gas masks and maybe a biplane or two, and you're all set. It's all you need to know.
Yes.
And in reality, there's a lot more to it, of course, and as evidenced with this. Want to bring history to life in your classroom? With Everything as a Primary Source to go, you can borrow real historical artifacts from the last 200 years, shipped right to your school. It's hands-on history, paired with ready-to-use lesson plans and classroom activities that make the past come to life for you and your students. Whether you're teaching the Industrial Revolution all the way up through the Communication Revolution, there's something in our collection for every era. Visit everything-history.com/EPS to go and start transforming your teaching today. That's everything-history.com/EPS to go, because history belongs in your hands. So some of the things that they're making sure that they have, that's almost like reading a grocery list of any time period. You mentioned about the coffee. This proves to us coffee culture had already been going on for a while. I was disappointed a few minutes ago and the coffee ran out. I probably drink too much of it.
You cannot run out of coffee at a conference. That's rule number one.
We love it. And obviously they loved it in the trenches too. They were after coffee. And you said the Marmite stuff?
Yeah, 12 Marmite cans, a rolling kitchen. So I'm assuming that probably includes the other kitchen accoutrement to
well, it is France,
cook, right? We got to throw in some French vocabulary. And then 28 men, so that's probably the men who are in the other, and then boxes of company records. So this is the not beautiful part of conflict. This is not the valor. This is not the movie clip, the documentary. This is just like the basics of running a military campaign. You have to have stuff. We talk about using primary sources, right? So you zoom in, and that's like small context. In the context of this tiny town is where the American troops are billeted, and they need this material to facilitate their training so they can go support the British Expeditionary Forces or the French, whomever. But if you zoom out from this is just like every other conflict. We're looking at continuity over time. Mm-hmm. Who's following the American Revolutionary Patriots? It's the chuck wagon.
Yeah.
Because, they gotta eat. Who's doing their laundry? It's probably women. So I suspect that there's probably far more to be seen about the impact on the daily life of the people inside this French community that were also participating in ways that we historically, sort of mainstream military historians don't see as combatants.
I love the full circuit nature of that. We just said how there's continuity through time. I mean, there was a lot of intentional symbolism with the First World War when Pershing arrives into Paris and visits Lafayette's, we have returned. We are here to return the favor of you helping us win our... But you could go back even further than that to the Crusades, because you think about the way that France was so, especially in the First Crusade, that's where the crusade was called for, was from Clermont in France. Right. And France really led the way. The Franks were very present in the first, actually all the crusades. And it was crusading in the Holy Land that exposed Western Europeans to so many different items.
Like coffee.
That eventually found their way into their regular diets and became highly in demand throughout the medieval period into the Renaissance. The Renaissance is when the New World is created, and the seeds are planted there to have certain tastes and things that people want in America. Now, in 1818, you have Americans, I'm assuming most of them have some kind of European ancestry, coming back to Europe and demanding and expecting all those things that were first introduced to their ancestors 1,000 years before, from these kinds of, and sometimes the World War is referred to as another crusade, another holy war, especially in the East. I mean, the Ottoman Empire, it was jihad. I mean, that was the goals, and you can see a lot of medieval symmetry, especially between
the British, the Lawrence and the promises,
the Ottomans and everything, and
definitely. I find that World War I is so vast, and we could spend a whole hour episode on this supply train, these 25 men, and what happened to them in this one tiny little village. And that is at the cost, right, of what's happening in Greece, what's happening in the Ottoman Empire, what's happening on the Eastern Front, which there's still so many... in the Soviet archives, I'm sure that there is so much stuff that just has not made its way to the West, that historians haven't had a chance to get their hands on to complement what we're seeing that's already so well documented from the French and the British sources.
Yeah.
The Imperial War Commission has done, I mentioned in another podcast, the Herculean task of naming every single person. They're named on a wall somewhere, and if they didn't get, if they have a headstone, that's great. But if they didn't, they're named on a wall. And just to upkeep that is, and the same goes for the Americans. We have American monuments that are in France that are maintained by the Department of Defense, sort of budget, and they're stunning. But we had a conversation prior to recording that Americans don't go.
Yeah.
They go to Normandy, and that's perfectly acceptable. But there are other places where Americans drank coffee and died.
Yeah. And it's, we have that connection to World War II because so many of our grandparents were involved in that. And yet we forget that the veterans of this war, a lot of them were very outspoken opponents of another American involvement in Europe, because we've already done that. We've been there, and it was not what you think it's going to be. Right?
I think what you said was really interesting about the immigrant experience, because this sort of tense time of we don't have a traditional standing military. If we're going to war, we will draft folks if they don't volunteer. We've got the preparedness movement that's happening in Plattsburgh. But you also have immigrant communities inside of New York City, Boston, Philly, who are now having conversations about loyalty. Are you German?
Mm-hmm.
Are you German American? Are you American? How do you demonstrate that? How do you prove that? Are you British? Are you Italian? Are you going back over there to fight for your country? Mm-hmm. Air quotes, like, whose country is this? And then how do you convince your neighbor who they can't follow the family tree of the Habsburgs to find out who an archduke is? How do you convince your neighbor that, like, their son's life is vital? That's Woodrow Wilson, right? This is the war for this new idea of democratic nationalism and the new century that will come. You got to invent it.
All of these things you're mentioning, I think, would add to a thesis that World War I is the actual arrival. It's not January 1st, 1901. It's arguably November 1918.
That's what I would say.
And then the Paris Accords of the following year, the Versailles Treaty, that whole experience, that's the entry to the 20th century.
Like, I mean, you have Ho Chi Minh, who doesn't get an audience with Wilson. He's at Versailles. And he's like, hey, we're doing democracy. I'd like the French to leave. Can they leave? And everyone's like, no.
I meant for
France
us.
is actually going to get a little bit more land. They're going to get a little bit more. And that is something he goes home with. What are the repercussions?
Yeah.
They could have never known. But it is a pivotal moment. My students ask all the time, like, who's the person in history that, like, where it all hinges? And it's Gabriel Princip on a corner with a sandwich. What was the sandwich? Don't know. I would love to know what kind of sandwich it was. We joke about this all the time.
Wasn't the driver of the car actually went the wrong way?
Yes.
And he just kind of, like, I mean, I can never say his name. You just did, so say it again.
Gabriel Princip. I'm probably also adding enough Serbian flair onto it.
Yeah, he was going to kill the Archduke. That was what he was trying to do.
Correct.
But he thought he had missed his opportunity, but then there was a detour, and the driver actually, he's like, oh.
So Kabrinovich is one of the other conspirators, and he is supposed to throw the bomb, like a grenade, that's supposed to land in the car and explode and, c'est la vie. Except that it doesn't go off when it's supposed to. The fuse is 7 to 12 seconds, and wherever it was in that timeline, the Archduke's car continues on the motorcade, which had been published, and bounced and exploded a couple cars back.
Jeez.
And so other assassins on the Apple Key on the road, they are, like, in shock and don't then perform the failsafe of shooting into the car. And a couple other guys, like, skipped out. They, like, chickened out, so they weren't there. And then the cars blow past Princip. And so they regroup. Kabrinovich does his part. He jumps into a river. He takes the cyanide. Like, he's fully committed. Except the cyanide is old and doesn't work, and he just pukes it up. And he's now got a broken leg, and he's picked up. And now the other guys are like, oh my God, he's gonna tell. Like, they're gonna beat him.
Have they ever made a movie out of this? Because it seems like that hour would be a movie.
Best movie.
Right?
No, not to my knowledge. There's like a 1990s History Channel that I will play until the CD breaks. But there is, depending on when this podcast comes out, there is a play currently going on in New York City called Archduke, and it's about the plan. It's hilarious. It's a comedy. It's 90 minutes. Can't recommend it enough.
So that might be something that turns into
I would watch that
film.
movie 100 times over. But then, so at that point, they decide to, like, scatter, as assassins are wont to do. And Princip goes to a sandwich shop, and the Archduke wants to go to the hospital to see the people who were hurt. Because, like, he's a monarch, he's not a monster. And that's when the driver makes a wrong turn. And I've read some various sources that either they were trying to put the car in reverse, or the cars didn't quite have reverse yet, so he had to put it into essentially neutral and then push the car back. I'm not an automotive historian, so I'm not sure which of those is accurate. But nonetheless, the car stops literally on the street corner right next to Princip.
My goodness.
And he fires
and then
the
that
shots.
changes.
And that's it.
I mean, I think we can all agree that World War I was going to happen happen one way or another. That just happened to be. It was like that started it.
This had been a plan.
There would have been something else. And the way those countries were just gearing up, it was a matter of time before something like that happened.
I mean, you've got issues with the Kaiser in Germany feeling all sorts of ways to his cousins. You've got already struggles that are happening in Russia. Does that spill over into a global conflict? I mean, with the alliance system, probably, inevitable.
So listeners, if you couldn't tell, Kristin is an expert, and she's actually designed tours of World War I sites in Europe. And
there's a spreadsheet.
There you go. I just want to end with another reference to a movie. I'm sure you've seen it. It's Ultimate Social Studies teacher movie. It's called Election.
Oh.
With Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon. At one point early in the movie, there's some foreshadowing in the background just to show that he's a social studies teacher. And I can't say his name, but the assassin,
Gabriello,
Precip is on the board. He's right next to his head.
Okay, it's his mugshot photo.
No, just like he wrote it in chalk.
Just wrote the name. Okay.
And it's like him teaching World War I, obviously. And, he's narrating over it, so you don't actually hear what he's saying, but it's over his shoulder. Do you remember how that movie ends? The last scene is?
No.
He's in Washington at a conference, and he spies Tracy Flick, his nemesis, leaving. She's now working as an intern for a congressman.
Okay.
They're getting into a limousine together and start driving down, and right in front of him, he's eating his lunch.
Stop it.
And he throws his Pepsi at the car and then just bolts. And I'm like, that's it. Foreshadowing. That's like their social studies teacher and Tom Perrotta, the author of the original book. The book ends totally different from the movie, but he himself was a teacher. I think English, but maybe social studies.
It's like a little Chekhov's gun. Like you should know. You should have noticed that in Act 1.
You can enjoy the movie completely without that, but it just adds that extra layer to it.
Well, I know what I'm watching later tonight.
Well, we all should, as social studies teachers, at least once a year watch Election. But thank you so much for giving your expertise to this, and I hope that it helps people learn that much more about World War I.
Absolutely.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything as a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.